Hey there, this is Joan from Tasteful Voyages, and I am here on Cinco de Mayo, and I'm going to teach you how to make chilaquiles. My husband Rich is helping me with this, and so if you have any comments or any questions, please ask him and he will be happy to let you know. So we're going to start with going over what the ingredients are. This is actually now kind of a convenience dish. It's a lot easier to make than it was at one time. And the reason is that we now have access to packaged tortilla chips that are actual tortillas that have been cut up and fried. Usually they come from a tortilla factory. This is from a local tortilla factory that we have that's called El Nopalito. When I was a kid, this was basically a dish that was made from leftover tortillas. My mother, if she didn't have any leftover tortillas, she would take regular tortillas, dry them up, and then tear them into little pieces like this, and then she would have to fry them. So there was quite a bit of preparation that went into this dish before we could actually get it going. Besides the tortillas, what you're going to need to make this dish is going to be an onion. This is a small onion. I like to use the sweet onions. This is actually a Mayan sweet onion. You're going to have some eggs in there. I have 6 eggs here ready to go. And you are going to use some tomato sauce. So we're going to take this can of tomato sauce and open it, and it's going to be filled up with water. Rich, if you could open that for me, please. So the tomato sauce we're going to get going first. And it's simply tomato sauce, 8 ounces of tomato sauce, not tomato paste, not ground tomatoes. And we're going to dilute the 8-ounce can of tomato sauce with a full can, 8 ounces of water. And I'm going to chop up my onion, and we're going to be having that simmering in the background while we're getting everything else ready. So here's my tomato sauce in the pan, and I'm adding my water. And I'm going to start that in the back here on a medium-low flame while I chop up my onion. The other ingredient that we have in the chilaquiles is cheese. This is a blend of Mexican cheeses that I'm using. This is an 8-ounce package, which comes out to about 2 cups or so. I don't like to have spicy food. That was not something that my family ever did, so we would always just make it with the tomato sauce with the onions and also a little bit of oregano. But if you really want to make it fast, you could always use pre-made salsa for your sauce to coat the tortillas, and you'll see how easy it is to substitute that. So I'm going to start out by chopping up my onion, and I'm going to show you what size the pieces are. It doesn't have to be really finely chopped. It's just like a medium-sized chop. And once we get that in the sauce with some oregano, that's just going to be going in the background until we need that. This is really a pretty easy dish to prepare, again, since you can purchase the tortilla chips that are already pre-made. It just makes it a lot easier. You can usually pull this dish together in about 15 minutes or so, and everybody likes it. It's a really good dish. Some people add additional things to it. They might add chorizo, which is the Mexican sausage, or they might add shredded chicken, or you could add beans. You could add cilantro. I don't personally care for cilantro, so I would never put that in. But it's something that you can really customize however you would like to do so. I'm just having a little tough time here getting the peel off this onion, but I'll be good. I did link the recipe in the invitation, but I will link it in the comments again if anybody cares to make this. I do have the recipe typed up and printed out. It's really quite easy to make, and as I mentioned, it's quite fast. Some of you may not know that my mother was actually from Mexico. She was born in Jalisco in 1928, and she came to the States as an infant. Her father was working in the steel mills in the south side of Chicago, and that's how she came here. My grandmother, who we called Mama Chul, didn't ever learn how to speak English. In her opinion, the U.S. was stolen from Mexico anyway, and she felt that everybody here should be speaking Spanish. So she never learned how to speak English. And my mother's family living here was always supposed to be a temporary arrangement. The plan was always to go back to Mexico, but they never really did. My mother was maybe 8 or 9 months old when the family came here, and she didn't have the opportunity to go back to Mexico until she was 13 or 14. And she absolutely fell in love with Mexico that first trip back. And when I was born and my sisters, my parents made it a point to take us to Mexico on a regular basis. We were very lucky. We would go every other year and spend about a month there. And the first time that I went was in 1963. I wasn't even 5 yet. We took the train from Chicago to Mexico. My mother had a very good friend who lived in Mexico City, and she had 3 boys that were about the same age as myself and my sisters. There were only 3 of us at that time. So we would always go and spend time with them in Mexico City, and then our 2 families would travel together. And that particular year, we did go to Acapulco. I really don't remember anything about being in Acapulco other than the cliff divers jumping into the water there. The next time that we went was in 1965, and we went again in 1967, and on both of those trips, we went to Puerto Vallarta, which was not the resort town that it is today. There were very few hotels. We actually stayed in a guest house both times. I'm going to be ready to work with my tortilla chips here. I have some canola oil that I'm going to put in the pan, and I want to talk about the pan. The pan that I use is a wok style pan, so if you have a wok, that's a perfect pan to cook this in because it's hot at the bottom. We're going to be cooking eggs in the bottom of the pan, and it's also deep enough where you can toss the tortilla chips around. If you don't have a wok style pan, you could use a Dutch oven, something like this, that's deep and gets nice and hot on the bottom. But I prefer to use a wok for this. So I'm going to start out by heating up some canola oil. It's probably going to be about 4 tablespoons in the bottom of the pan. And I'm going to start that. And then with the tortilla chips still in the bag, and this is going to be noisy, I'm going to crush them up. We don't want to have the big pieces of tortilla in there. We want to kind of crush them up. So I'm going to just do that. If there are any big pieces left when I pour this out, I can break them up with the spatula that I'm using. But it's just easiest to do most of it like that. And my oil's getting a little bit hot. This is on a medium-high flame right now. So I'm just going to pour all of those in there. I'm adding some oregano to the sauce. It's about a tablespoonful of oregano. And I'm just going to be letting that stir in the background while we are cooking the chips. And that's over a medium to low flame. Now the chips, I've got my oil in the pan, and I'm going to kind of toss the chips around in the oil. I want them to start getting warmed up, and I also want them to start get a little bit of a coating with the oil. You can see I still have some pieces in here that are a little bit big, so I'm breaking them up with my spatula. And what we're going to start to do here is to break the eggs into here. The eggs are going to go right into the oil on the bottom of the pan, and we're going to let them get set a little bit, and then we're going to actually be tossing the eggs over the tortillas in the pan to kind of coat them a little bit, and then they'll cook like that. So I have 6 eggs here. These are large-sized eggs. If your eggs are pretty big, like jumbo eggs, you probably only want to use 4 of them or so. So I'm just going to drop that right in there. Turn my flame up a little bit so it's sizzling right away. And my egg it looks just like a fried egg. I'm going to let it set up a little bit so that the white starts to set up. But as soon as it starts to get set, I'm going to start tossing it with the chips. And it's starting to sizzle a little bit, so I'm just going to start tossing it. So I'm basically pulling the raw egg over the chips in the pan. And I'm going to be repeating this with the other eggs that I have here. So the process is just to drop an egg in there, let it set a little bit, and then have it start coating the chips that are in the pan. This is traditionally a breakfast or a brunch dish. My family also enjoyed having it for dinner. The word chilaquiles allegedly comes from a Nahuatl word. Nahuatl was one of the indigenous people in Mexico, and the word is supposed to mean green and chile, so apparently they probably had some kind of chiles in it. at the beginning. As I mentioned, I don't use it that way, but there's all sorts of variations of this dish. So, you know, sometimes somebody probably did have chiles that were in here. Once I get all the eggs mixed in here, I'm going to bring the pan over so you can see what it looks like. You'll see bits of cooked eggs kind of coating the chips, and you'll be able to make out a little bit. Some of the egg is white, some of the egg is yellow. So it's not really like it's scrambling in the pan. It's more like it's just setting up a little bit and then getting tossed to coat the chips. And the whole time that I'm tossing this around, the chips are getting hotter. And you don't really need to worry about the eggs sticking in the bottom of the pan, because when we add the sauce to the pan, that's going to kind of deglaze some of the eggs up from the bottom of the pan. And I still have 3 more eggs to go in there. I want to talk a little bit about Cinco de Mayo. Today is Cinco de Mayo. And here in the States, we tend to refer to Cinco de Mayo as Mexican Independence Day, and it really is not Mexican Independence Day. Cinco de Mayo is the anniversary of the date when a small army of Mexicans defeated a much larger and much better equipped army of French soldiers in 1862 in the province of Puebla. The actual Mexican Independence Day was in 1810 on the 16th of September, and that is when the Mexican army, led by a priest, Father Hidalgo, started war against the Spaniards, and that was what led to the first Mexican independence. Ultimately, France came in and took advantage of some of the divisions in the country, and that was who was defeated in 1862 on the Cinco de Mayo. And Cinco de Mayo has gained prominence in the United States. It kind of was a symbol of the resistance of the indigenous small army defeating the French army in 1862. And that date was adopted here in the States in the 1960s during the farm workers movement, when people were trying to unionize the farm workers here in the U.S. And it's since become a really popular holiday here in the States. And this year, Cinco de Mayo coincides with Taco Tuesday, so how fun is that? So I've got my last egg in there. I still have some bits of raw egg on some of these chips, which need to get a little bit more solidified, because I don't want to be serving raw eggs. And I'm going to bring the sauce over real quickly so you can take a look at what that looks like. The sauce doesn't really cook for very long, so the onions don't get really very soft. I don't know if you can see the sauce in there. Can you see it? So it's just basically like a thin tomato sauce with the oregano and the onions in there. The onions are still going to have a little bit of a crunch when I put them over the tortilla chips here. I'm going to turn this down a little bit. And we're almost there. Most of the egg on here seems to be set up, and I'm not really seeing any patches of raw egg. So I'm going to bring this over and show you what this looks like. I wanted to add, I don't add any extra salt to this because the tortilla chips are salted already. But I want you to be able to see what this looks like with the bits of egg kind of like strewn over the chips. And I'm going to get my cheese ready here. The one last thing I want to do before I toss this all together is to slice up an avocado, because an avocado is a really nice garnish to have on the side of the chilaquiles. So I'm going to get that going over here. just a couple of slices of avocado. We're lucky living here in California. We get really good avocados pretty much all year round. Okay, so that's all set. So now what I'm going to do is take the tomato sauce and pour it right over the tortillas that are in the pan. And I'm going to work quickly because I don't want the tortillas in here to get too soggy. I want them to stay crunchy. So I've got my sauce in there, and I'm just going to kind of fold the sauce into the tortilla chips to kind of coat them with the sauce. Bring the pan over another time so you can see. There's kind of like the reddish color from the tomato sauce on the tortilla chips, and you can see the onions on there. And I'm actually going to turn my flame off here because the very last step is going to be to add this cheese. So I'm going to put in about half the bag. The cheese is actually shredded really, really fine, so it's going to melt really quickly because this is all really hot. And we just want to kind of stir it around to incorporate the cheese fully into this and make sure that the cheese gets melted. But since it's shredded so thinly, it's going to melt pretty quickly. Put the last of the cheese in here. Almost done. I'm just stirring it around to get the last of that melted. I want to have a quick word with you about salsas. As I mentioned, I don't care for this to be really spicy, but you can add your own salsa, and there's a couple of salsas that I really like. This is one that's produced here in the United States. It's called Pace. This is generally available, and you can get this either mild, medium, or spicy. And there's a couple from Mexico that you can get too. Herdez salsa casera is one that's also generally available. This is produced in Mexico, and on the cans they have like a little thermometer to indicate how spicy it is. This is another brand of the salsa casera, and it just makes a really nice garnish for this. If you do like spices, rather than preparing the tomato sauce with the onions and oregano as I did, you could always just take a bottle of this and use that as the sauce to pour over the chilaquiles. So now it is time to serve them. I'm just going to put a nice big dollop of that in here, and I'm going to garnish this with my avocado slices. And there we have it, our finished dish, the chilaquiles. I really do hope that you'll try it, have a little taste of Mexico in your home, and I'm hoping to come back sometime next week with another recipe to share with you. And that is it for today. I hope you enjoyed this. I'd love your feedback in the comments. Thank you so much for watching.